Hi, this is Scott Elliott Hicks. I would like to today work on the beginning of a series of videos where I demonstrate and work through the 15 keys or approaches to spiritualizing, etherizing, deactualizing, or entering into living thinking and sensation and perception, as is outlined in my recent work. My recent book is Earthly, Transcendental, and Spiritual Logic from Husserl's Phenomenology to Steiner's Anthroposophy, which is available here on Amazon. It's on a Kindle edition and also in a paperback edition. In the end of this book, I outline 15 keys that I demonstrate in the activity of the book. This book is a little bit different from a normal book that you might read by the fact that it is a direct demonstration of starting out with normal consciousness, normal perception, and normal thinking, and then slowly working through the issues of what a mental image is, what representation is, and then opening a vista to the direct experience of living thinking, of the threshold, the moral threshold that arises, all the difficulties and riddles that appear at the threshold between normal consciousness and the other side, the world of pure ideas, of pure thinking, and of the life world, let's say. So, in this series of videos, I'm just going to work down through these 15 keys that I use, and I encourage you to follow along. Feel free to purchase the book if you'd like, but I'm going to demonstrate some of the very simple beginnings of activating these keys. And then you guys can create your own keys in order to develop your individual path into the spiritual world that is possible in the 21st century. My work arises out of many years' study and uh, direct work with Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy in general. Also, I've been working for 10 years in the Global School of Spiritual Science, the Independent School of Spiritual Science directed by Yeshayahu Ben-Haron. And also, I've spent many years studying Edmund Husserl and the history of philosophy in general. But this book tries to use Edmund Husserl's phenomenology as a starting point. Okay, so the theme for today is to find the difference between sense perception and categorical intuition. To find the difference between sense perception and categorical intuition. Okay, we're trying to actually activate this difference, to notice this difference in our own consciousness. And I encourage you to try to do this as well, because to merely think about it is not enough. We have to do it. We have to do it. We have to perform it in order to start to enter into the real world, or to allow the real world to appear, which we can't find in representation. So I say to find the difference between sense perception and categorical intuition. You could say it in a more simple way, to find the difference in our experience moment to moment between sense perception and thinking. But let's investigate this issue of categories and intuition a little bit further. First of all, I would like to discuss a little bit about intuition. Intuition is a very important concept in the history of philosophy, and it's many times understood by those people who can't experience living thinking or mix it together with our unfortunate use of this word in English to mean a gut instinct. So, intuition is a direct viewing in thinking, a direct viewing in thinking of the content of concepts, a direct viewing and grasping in pure thinking of concepts. And concepts are not mere words or mental pictures, but they are meaning life. They're meaning gestures. They are activities on the planes of pure concepts. It's an activity which is not just subjective, but it is penetrates and meets the spiritual reality of the world, the ideal reality of the world. And it's not the whole of reality, but it is one pole of living reality. And the reason why I pulled up Rudolf Steiner's The Philosophy of Freedom here is to read this very important preface for a second. He says, there are two fundamental questions in the life of the human soul toward which everything to be discussed in this book is directed. One is it possible to find a view of the essential nature of man? Now, this view is a translation of the German Anschauung, and this means intuition. This is an intuitive grasping. So we're not talking about yet a activation of spiritual imagination. This comes later. We're talking about an intuition, a grasping and looking into and a living experience of the realm of meaning itself, which is non-sensible, something I penetrate and dive into with thinking. And it's a tool and a power that human beings have. It's a most human activity. We're trying to penetrate to this living thinking. You might say, on the one hand, we have sensible intuition, we have sense perception. So I can see the external contours of my coffee cup, for example. I grasp the contents moment to moment of the coffee cup. The colors, for example. Excuse me. On the other hand, categorical intuition is looking into meaning structures, meaning objects, but they're also changing moment to moment, and they have their own they have their own dimension, which is just as lively, just as alive, just as perceptible, just as graspable, just as understandable as the colors that I see on the coffee cup. And this is the meaning of coffee cup, the meaning of any coffee cup whatsoever. Could be related to concepts of clay, ceramics, firing, painting. And these are aspects of meaning which my meaning eye, so to speak, my mental eye is focused. And we all have mental eyes which look into the contours of thinking. This is intuition. So when I directly dive into the pure meaning of any cup whatsoever, where thinking is engaged and seeing and self-consciously aware of its own activity in the plane of real concepts, then this is intuition. So there's been many arguments over the history of philosophy about intuition. You have Kant in the 18th century saying, no, really, there's only sensible intuition. I can only really have a grasping of sense objects, and then my thinking just organizes this. And this is basically a modern standpoint for natural science. But people like Fichte, already a few years after Kant, and moving up through Schelling and Hegel and Steiner himself, and into the 20th century with Husserl, for example, people started to recognize and activate in their own being. Some people like myself realize that one can actually see ideas. One can see ideas which have different qualities than what we see with in the sense world. So this is what Steiner's talking about. Is it possible, this is the question, to find an intuition of the essential nature of man? So this really means the essence of man, which is not subjective, not objective. This is something that's before the creation of concepts. So something which is not just in a body, not outside a body, not in space, not in time, something which is utmost real, and something that notices and is self-aware of the moment where it creates concepts, where it creates the concepts of subjectivity or consciousness itself. So, are we able to experience an intuition in pure thinking of this essential nature of the human being, such as will give us a foundation for everything else that comes to meet us? So, this is a foundation. The idea is basically we awaken the thinker, the self-aware. It's really a spiritual being, the I am, who is able to think anywhere, to create thoughts at any time, and to see its own creation of thoughts, to see that concepts are the robes that it uh, uses to dress the pure, formless reality of the spiritual world. So, can we intuit this essential nature of the human being, active inside and outside, this pulse, world human, uh, personal I, this pulse of this reality, to give a foundation for everything that comes to meet us, whether it's in spiritual reality or in sense reality, whether through life experience or through science, which we feel is otherwise not self supporting and therefore liable to be driven by doubt and criticism into the realm of uncertainty. Okay, so we notice that in our life experience, which is subjective, we might feel limited. Also, through science, we feel the limits. Science can only go so far, and it's not self supporting. It's actually, we're investigating, let's say, the life of bees. So, this is not something that that's a support for our own nature. This is something that we are investigating somewhat subjectively. We're not becoming the bees, let's say, when we're studying the hive and the way that they collect pollen or collect, pollen and or collect the nectar and such. Okay, so and of course he goes on to ask also, is this a place where we can be free? And the answer is yes, but we can represent yes, or we can actually do it. So we're trying to do stuff here. So this is categorical intuition. This is intuition that I'm focusing on here. Remember, the main question is find the difference between sense perception and intuition. Now, what's this business about categorical? So I wanted to talk about the categories in general. Perhaps you know that basically one of the fathers of philosophy was Aristotle. He was so important in the history of philosophy that he was just called the philosopher up till 15th century or so. And in his work from 400s BC called The Categories, he develops this list of uh, structures, uh, elements, basic fundamental elements of human thinking that organize all of our activity. And he has 10 of them, which you can see here. Ousia, substance, quantity, qualification, things that are relative, relation, place, time, being in a position, having, doing, and being affected or affection in terms of undergoing something. Like an elephant stepping on my head, that's being affected. I'm affected there. The elephant is doing the action, stepping on my head as it's okay. I'm fine. Just an imagination. And when the elephant steps on my head, then I'm in the condition of having a flat head. I'm in the position of being in a crater on the ground. This happened at 3:46 in the afternoon in I don't know, Côte d'Ivoire. I don't know if there are any elephants in Côte d'Ivoire, but in any case, the relationship is between the elephant and myself. The quality that I feel is extreme pain, the quality of the pure sensation of the moment when the elephant steps on my head and flattens it. So now my head has a quality of flatness, and the the elephant has the sensation of success. Quantity, there's one elephant. It has four legs, and only one of the legs is used to press down on my head at exactly this position, 2 inches from my right ear, for example. And the substance or the reality or the ousia, the essence of this is, well, could be the essence of the elephant, the essence of the human being, and we're all we're all connected in being in general. Now, being is not one of the categories for Aristotle. It's something that's kind of beyond this. But there you go. So there's an example of categories. Now, the important thing to recognize here is that the categories are definitely not experienced in sense perception. And this is where people have a lot of difficulty. These are things that are only thought. Quantity is not something that I perceive. Quantity is something that I think. So Husserl was brilliant in recognizing, and Husserl was trained as a mathematician. He had a PhD in mathematics. He recognized that when we collect objects into a set. So if I see on a table 3 apples, my sense perception is not what collects the moment by moment sensations of red from this angle, from that angle, and the background of black on the stone table that I perceive from different perspectives, angle by angle, and that I collect into the idea of, that I connect, let's say, into the idea or concept of an apple, right? I have these different angles of the red of the apples that are in front of me, but I'm not seeing the idea of an apple. I'm actually seeing this one angle of red with reflection from one side. And we'll do more examples of this so you can get a clearer idea of this. But Husserl recognizes that collecting these chaotic and disparate and variations of sense perception into, first of all, the idea of apples, and which we experience in thinking, in intuition, with the quantity of 3 is something that I think of it as collecting it into a set. This is kind of a mathematical representation, but the concept of 3 is a set of 3 objects, which could apply to, you know what I mean, any circumstances of having 3 objects. This is not something that's perceived. This is something that I think. So my thinking organizes this chaotic sense impressions into the set of 3 objects, which it perceives as this prototypical concept and direct intuition. With my thinking has arms, or it has eyes, or it has organs, and it joins together the chaos of the red with the empty prototype, the flexible empty prototype in pure thinking of the set of 3. So that experiencing in thinking, the set of 3 objects, of any 3 objects whatsoever, that's a category. And you see that it might relate to Aristotle's categories in terms of quantity, and they're related to each other, etc. Okay, so let's see here. What I think I would like to do now is go back to the central question. So finding the difference between, we're activating the difference between sense perception and categorical intuition. So we're trying to experience this in our own life right now. Okay. I think that a great way to do this is to take a glance for some inspiration at Deleuze, Gilles Deleuze's book on Francis Bacon. Strangely enough, you might think, I hate postmodernism. I don't even know who Gilles Deleuze is. Some of you were saying, I don't know who this Rudolf Steiner guy is. I don't know. I don't know where you're coming from, but I find Gilles Deleuze is super helpful because he developed living thinking to a certain extent in the 60s. He was a French philosopher who wrote fantastic books. Five or six of them are some of the highest caliber and quality books ever written, like The Logic of Sense and Difference and Repetition, and his book on the painter, Francis Bacon, is fantastic. And I just wanted to mention that, none of the work that I'm doing now would have been possible without the direct instruction that I received from Yeshayahu Ben Aharon. So I really appreciate that. You can see his treatment of Gilles Deleuze in his books, Spiritual Science in the 21st Century and The Event in Science, History, Philosophy, and Art. You can also see my take on Deleuze in my book, The Resurrection of Thinking, and I'll put links to that in this video. Okay, so Francis Bacon is well, I don't find him to be the best example to use for this, but here's an example where Gilles Deleuze is talking about Cezanne. Okay, so notice here, I'll just read what he says here. Cezanne gave a simple name to this way of the figure, sensation. The figure is the sensible form related to a sensation. It acts immediately upon the nervous system, which is of the flesh, whereas abstract form is addressed to the head and acts through the intermediary of the brain, which is closer to the bone. Certainly, Cezanne did not invent this way of sensation in painting, but he gave it an unprecedented status. Sensation is the opposite of the facile and the ready-made, the cliché, but also of the sensational, the spontaneous, etc. Sensation has one face turned toward the subject, the nervous system, vital movement, instinct, temperament, a whole vocabulary common to both naturalism and Cezanne, and one face turned toward the object, the fact, the place, the event. Or rather, it has no faces at all. It is both things I don't know how to say this word, indissolubly. It is being in the world, as the phenomenologists say, or let's say, as Heidegger says, at one and the same time, I become in the sensation, and something happens through the sensation, one through the other, one in the other. And at the limit, it's the same body, which, being both subject and object, gives and receives this sensation. So this is the part that I want to really focus on here. Whoops. I have no idea what happened there. Oh, yeah, there you go. So I become in the sensation, and something happens through the sensation, one through the other, one in the other. So this has to do with perception. Let's say the sensation, what philosophers sometimes call affect, from the Latin affectio, doing something towards something, apperception. This is a pure becoming, a melting together of my own experience of sensation and perception with the whole world. You can see this technique elaborately laid out in Yeshayahu Ben Aharon's work, Cognitive Yoga. Okay, so this is from Francis Bacon by Deleuze. Okay, so let's try to experience this now. Let's try to experience the pure perception. And I'm going to do this. Well, let's look at Cezanne actually first to see what Deleuze was even talking about in terms of Cezanne. So the issue of figure is not so important to me, but taking a look at this painting, which is called L'Estaque by Cezanne, we can see his it's a tool. I think this painting is a tool. It's a machine in all the best sense. Let's say it's a sensation operation of. It's like a machine, but it's not in parts. It's an activity. It's a pulse. This thing pulses, and if we can always reawaken the pulse of this painting, then we start to merge together with it. So we can keep our head. We don't have to become. We can do this soberly. Let's say we don't have to get too crazy. when we melt together with the color here, but we can actually do this. We can try to set aside our normal way of experiencing things, set aside our mental image and our hopes, our wishes, our knowledge, and try to merge together with the pure colors. So when I try to uh, melt my eye together with the blue, then I find that I start to wonder why did I think that there's really a surface of the screen of my laptop. I'm looking at my laptop right now, where I can see the image projected on the browser window. I start to ask myself, oh, I actually have an idea about space, about me being in the body and the computer being out there. I have these concepts that I organize my experience with, but actually, if I set those aside, I can merge together in a kind of productive chaos with the colors that in a gentle way, with an open heart, I flow out into the whites and the yellows, with the slight pink, with the blue, with the various greens, with the angles, with the shadows, and it becomes indeterminate, but indeterminate in a productive sense, in a productive, chaotic sense, and I can just become pure color. And so we notice that when we focus on uh, the pure gesture, when I become the pure gesture, and the pure gesture becomes me, when I open up to the pure gesture of the green flowing into me, I allow the green, I ask quietly the green to approach me, and not for my personal gain. This is where, when we really enter into the perception, we have to have a devotional or a moral quality. Rudolf Steiner mentions this again and again about this devotional quality that has to enliven all of our thinking work. So, this is also what happens at the threshold between sense experience and supersensible experience, that I really have to realize that, to look at myself with all my dead thinking, look at myself with all of my uh, human characteristics, which are not so great all the time. We all have various moral failings. In fact, I reverse the world into my own personal possession at every minute. So this is something that's a moral threshold we have to face, and this is really necessary to enter into this pure sensation. But even if we don't go so far, we can recognize that uh, in this painting by Cezanne, we we can more easily set aside the idea of a forest or a hill or the ocean or a tree, because of the way that the forms have become chaotic and indeterminate, like pure color, that the impressionists or expressionists, or I'm sorry, I'm not so great with differentiating between one style of French painting and the other, but if we can more easily recognize the difference between the concept, when I think the concept of the ocean, when I think the concept of a forest, when I think the concept of a stone. This is something where my thinking is walking through giants of concepts in a real land that's filled with meaning life. And so when my thinking is penetrating into the concept of a forest, any forest whatsoever, it has a totally different character. It's not coming from a perspective, it's coming from a pure meaning gesture. And the concept of any forest is approaching me in thinking. So, this is something that I experience in my thinking, but it's not on the canvas. It's not expressed by the colors on the canvas or on the screen. We see rather these pure colors, which are experience and sensation. So I'm experiencing the sensation on the one hand, and on the other hand, I can look and gently pull apart the thinking activity of what's the concept of any tree at all. How do I experience that in thinking? What are the qualities as my thinking dives into pure concept land, where I see that all thoughts are organized together? where I'm actually outside the body because the body is a concept. And the I is standing in the thinking world, aware of itself, this self awareness, this activity of linking concepts together, of linking the concept of, I could link at one time the concept of a forest with the concept of the elephant crushing my head. And you see that this could be linked to different sides. I could imagine the elephant's in a forest, or I have to be taken out of the forest in order to go to the hospital, or at any different side. And you can see that the experience of the essence of thinking, this self sustaining standpoint, is happening in intuitive thinking, not any particular elephant, not any forest, not mental image, but what happens when I understand the meaning of any forest. It's like the flash of an explosion or a star coming toward me, and I realize, oh yes, I understand the meaning of a forest, and I experience that in thinking, not in seeing the color on the screen or on the canvas. And on the other hand, so when one practices this, as you can see in Yeshayahu Ben Haron's cognitive yoga, I can go back and forth between this pulse. Rudolf Steiner mentions this quite clearly in The Boundaries of Natural Sciences as well. This is one place where he describes it. So separating sense perception from thinking. So I experience the sense perception on the one hand. I experience the pure color. I become pure color. I swim together with the colors all around me. You know, I can see my kitchen here and the outside, and they're all filled with various colors, and I'm merging together with this ocean of perception. And on the other hand, then I'm looking into pure concepts, into pure meaning gestures, and my thinking arm, my thinking eye, my thinking uh, being is penetrating, is walking in this land of pure meaning life, pure meaning gestures. So we see this is the difference. And if we separate these two poles, then we can begin to be quiet in the middle zone between them. So when we quiet ourselves down in the middle zone between these things, then we can start to experience the real threshold, the experience of pure time flowing, flowing of pure time, duration. And this can give an avenue toward the awakening of the supersensible I in a more direct fashion. And this can connect us, and give us a beginning standpoint for little by little over many, many years developing etheric cognition with the meeting of the event that's happening in the etheric world right now that's transforming the whole earth. And as we do this separation activity, we can meet new life, and we can also generate more and more life where we begin to experience and create new pulses, new gestures, new concepts that we link all together. Okay, so I wanted to mention that. You can see this emphasized even more in this passage from Rudolf Steiner's Philosophy of Freedom, and then we'll end this video for today. So this is Steiner from GA4. We must picture to ourselves a being with fully developed human intelligence arising out of nothingness and approaching the world. What he would become aware of in it before he brought his thinking into activity is the pure content of observation. So this is this, he's saying, imagine this being, but also we can become this being. This is when I merge together with the pure sensation of Cezanne. The world would then show this being only the bare aggregate without interconnection of the objects of sensations, colors, tones, sensations of pressure, warmth, taste, and smell. Okay, this is the kind of full experience, not just color, but pure, where I become pure smell, pure taste, pure pressure, tones. I merge together with the whole sensation world. And then we can slowly enter into the wholeness of the world and recognize that warmth is something that expands way beyond my body. And taste and smell is the same thing. There are multiple fields that are overlapping. And I really recognize that my body is connected with the whole harmony of the whole spiritual world. Okay, this aggregate is the content of pure observation without thoughts. So you see, he's talking about this aggregate, this chaotic flow, and then thinking is separated over there. And then he says, over against it stands thinking, which is ready to unfold its activity when a point of attack is found. So this is almost like a recapitulation of his GA3, truth and knowledge or truth and science, where we experience the given, the aggregate, and then at that moment, thinking, bam, thinking pops, thinking explodes, and I organize my whole field of chaotic perceptions into knowledge, into knowledge and science. Okay, thinking is capable of drawing threads from one element of observation to the other. There's the formation of the set. Thinking connects definite concepts with these elements and brings them thereby into a relationship. Exactly. So I see three apples. The elephant steps on my head, and I realize, oh, there's an elephant there, and now I'm dying. We have already seen above how a sound confronting us is joined with another observation through the fact that we designate the former as the effect of the latter. Okay, so we have this real interesting pulse between these two concepts of cause and effect. But the super, super, super important thing to see here is this statement by Steiner, which is, I have to say it, absolutely ignored by people that study the philosophy of freedom. There's very few people that have really experienced the thinking which is not subjective. So notice what he says. When we now recall that the activity of thinking is absolutely not to be taken as subjective. So this means that all of our personal opinions, all of our personal memories, all of our personal mental images we've made, thinking, that's not thinking. So the thinking activity he's describing from the very moment of the preface at every single stage through the entire book, Steiner's demonstrating living thinking, which is in the spiritual world, united with the whole spiritual being of the philosophy of freedom in the spiritual world as a living being. And my thinking can meet up, can connect with this living pulse. And there I realize that thinking is neither objective nor subjective. It's what could we call it? We can't. It's hard to escape from Latin. This word, yaki o yakara, to throw something. This ject idea, you know what I mean? We could say rejected, injected, subjective, objective, or whatever, but we're still connected to this idea that's kind of limited by the Romans, but it's in the middle zone. It's in the living warmth of the middle zone where the I wakes up in concept land, and it's beyond concepts. It's continuously creating its own concepts. I'm creating concepts of my own individuality. So he says, if we recall that the activity of thinking, if we actualize the activity of thinking as not subjective, we will thus also not be tempted to believe that such connections established through thinking have a merely subjective validity. So here he's talking about the fact that, as Deleuze says, as I say, as many people who experience this say, the handful that experience this say, you can walk in concept land. Concepts are real spiritual beings at the other side of their activity. Concepts are things that have a withering aspect and a blossoming aspect. They're alive and connected to real spiritual beings, but they're also connected to mental images at the lowest level, and then they get put into my personal experience, organized in words and language, and then stored in the nervous system, basically, in this chemical, electrical brain configuration. But that's not their reality, that's their reflection. That's their earthly reflection, which is grasped by Ahriman and Lucifer in the way you can read about in Steiner. Okay, so we don't want to be tempted to believe that these connections have a subjective validity. There's something that's seen in the real concept plane, and we're all looking there. When I understand you, when we're talking about something, we're looking at these connections in the concept plane itself. We're not somehow going through this representation activity of me saying words and them coming through the air and then you go into your ear or whatever. This is an external reflection, which is totally dead and different from the fact that we're all looking into the same singular concept at each moment, which is flowing, which is changing, but it's still the same concept. So this is, I think, everything that I wanted to mention today. Oh no, I also wanted to mention that you could look at You can approach this in a different way. Ooh, it's very nicely experienced. You can see this on my blog spot, Scott Elliott Hicks at blogspot.com. You can read my blog from November 25th, 2018, about Matisse, Henri Matisse, marrying the Lady of Space in cognitive yoga. And here's a great example of Entrance to the Casbah by Henri Matisse. This is a great painting to use to try this experiment further out as you take a look at it, because the red is so prominent and the dimensions of space have kind of collapsed in this painting. So you can see one can merge with the pure perception here to remember, separate our experience of perception when we're looking at this Matisse painting from our experience of any thinking we might have. The idea of a man, the idea of carpet, the idea of, I have no idea what these little gray things are in the distance. So here it's a bit more indeterminate. I could say they're, I don't know what they are. Tiny elephant heads. I don't know. Okay, so feel free to experiment with that as much as you like. And my name's Scott Elliott Hicks. You can check out more of my works and purchase my works on Amazon.com. And I will see you next time, where we'll go through step 2, finding the difference between a representation or mental image and an imageless concept, which will be good work. So, Scott Hicks signing off. See you later, folks.